Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are going to wait a few more seconds before we really kick things off. I'm going to give folks an opportunity to get logged in and situated. So bear with us in these next few moments as we hang out for a few. Okay, for those of you who have joined us in the last 15 seconds, we're going to give folks just another few more seconds to get signed on and logged on before we really kick things off. So I'll be doing a countdown of me filling your audio space.
Next time you should have some elevator music or something like that.
I was thinking about doing that, but I'll save that for my next rodeo. One more window to manage.
Sounds good.
All right, we are 1 minute past the hour, so I think that we can get things started. First of all, thank you so much for joining us today and learning about how cloud-based technology is helping to shape the future of public transit. And I'm also excited to be joined here with Luke and Sophie from Spare and Transit. And we're going to have a conversation about how they've been working with other agencies and their partners to help bring transit confidence back. So the first thing that I like to do for every meeting is to start with an agenda. I guess it's my public sector background, but just to give everyone an idea of how today's webinar is going to flow, we are going to start with a round of introductions. And then before we really talk about the future of transit and where cloud-based technology fits in, I really want to level set with some of the challenges that we as a community have been facing over the last several months, really unprecedented challenges, to really ground us in how we look at the future. And then I'm going to invite Luke and Sophie to share a little bit about how they've been working with their partners to address some of these challenges. I'll also be sharing some information, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what brings us together and why the three of us from our individual companies are here today to talk with you all. And finally, we will be having a live Q&A session at the end of our presentation. So just to take care of a little bit of housekeeping, I want to make sure that our Q&A function is working properly. I have my lovely colleague Morgan here monitoring that system. So I'm going to run us through a little exercise. If you can find the Q&A button at the bottom right of your screen, I would love to test it out. So if you all could type in where you all are joining from. I'm a geography nerd, so selfishly, I'm a little curious. If you can test that function, we'll just make sure that all of our tech is working before we really dive into things. Ooh, and I see my little Q&A bubble filling up. So thank you all for testing out. Let's see what kind of responses we have. Ooh, Brooklyn, Toronto, Saskatoon, Boulder, DC. Thank you for joining. Well, everyone, thank you. I'm not going to read where everyone is calling from, but it seems like a very geographically diverse audience. So again, thank you all for joining us. And thank you all for making sure that our tech is working. Introductions. So today, my name is Anita, and I'm from Swiftly. But first, I would love to introduce Luke and Sophie. Luke is joining us from Spare, and Sophie is joining us from Transit App. Luke, would you mind just giving us a brief introduction as to who you are and what Spare is?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi everyone, my name's Luke, really excited to be here today. I'm the growth lead at Spare in North America. I've been with Spare for just about 2 years now. In my previous role, I was a transportation construction engineer. So I've made quite the switch over the last few years to the tech sector, but still focused on transportation, which I love. And at Spare, I get to work with a great team that speaks with transit agencies about all things related to demand responsive transit. And so Spare is really kind of the go-to platform for all things related to on-demand transit. And this includes microtransit, paratransit, non-emergency medical transport, or just about everything outside of fixed route. We're based in Vancouver, BC, and we have services across about 4 continents. And for some local Ontario context, we're best known for our Durham Region project, Durham Region Transit project that launched last year, which I'm going to touch on a little bit more later today. And Spare will also be launching with Milton Transit in the coming months. So looking forward to that. Thanks for having me today.
Thanks so much, Luke. Sophie, if you wouldn't mind doing the same for our wonderful guests.
Of course. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I am on the partnerships team at Transit. I've been working with Transit for about 4 years. We are North America's most popular mobile app for public transit trip planning and real-time information. So we were born in 2012 in Montreal, right when there was quite a revolution in transit data. So, and you know, today we've got everything from real-time information to mobile ticketing to on-demand, and it's thanks to transit agencies sharing this data openly, but also companies like Swiftly and like Spare that make this high quality data possible. So thanks to you both.
Thank you, Sophie and Luke. It is such an honor to have you here with us today. And thank you everyone who has joined for this webinar. My name is Anita Davidson, and I am an account executive here with Swiftly. I've been here for a little over a year, but before that, I grew up in the public sector and spent the beginning part of my career with SEPTA, which is a public transit authority in Philadelphia. And I worked there as a transit planner and a capital grant writer. So my heart is really with the public sector. But now at Swiftly, I get to work with transit agencies from all over the company. We work with over 90 agencies, and we support agencies through our big data platform. And we do this by providing highly accurate real-time passenger information and a suite of historical insights and analytics tools, as well as operational tools. So thank you all for joining us today. And now that we all know who everyone is, except for all of you, I wish I could meet you all in person, but this will have to suffice. To really start us off, I want to discuss some of the challenges that we have as a community had to face over the last several months. And we wanted to break them down into 3 categories to help guide our conversation. And the first challenge that I think everyone in this virtual room can relate to is, how do we bring ridership back? And I was really hoping to have Sophie speak to this challenge. And the reason why I want Sophie to speak to this, because I think Transit App has done an amazing amount of work around real-time crowding. And you all also hosted a webinar earlier this week where you got to talk about your partnership with APTA and the incredible ridership dashboard. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about bringing ridership back and the work that you've been doing over the last few months to really engage this challenge.
Definitely. So the dashboard with APTA actually takes data from usage of the app. So because we have millions of users using the app in different cities, we found ourselves in the unique position to help expose ridership trends, because when the pandemic hit and ridership dropped, our usage fell in parallel. So by combining our usage data with APTA ridership data, we're able to uncover certain trends. And I'd encourage you, you can find a link to this dashboard through our website. But something else I wanted to discuss is more specifically what's going to bring riders back. And in addition to seeing these trends, we've conducted a series of surveys throughout the pandemic to really understand, for those still riding or those not riding anymore, why is that? How are they feeling? So we found that among those riding less or not at all, what will bring them back is actually outside of agencies' control. So a lot of it depends on the vaccine. A lot of it depends on things reopening up. But we also found that riders' tolerance to crowding has changed. So 65% of riders before the pandemic didn't mind being squished like sardines while riding transit, but now that's changed and dropped to 10% of riders. But what we also found is that 70% of those respondents actually said they would ride more if they were provided with real-time crowding information. So that's something we can control. So we sprang into action, and I'll talk a bit more about a few case studies about crowding data a little later on in this webinar. But overall, my message is that in this day and age, riders are turning to their phones to get information now more than ever in order to make safe trips. And the more that information is standardized, the more it can be disseminated widely through not just our app, but all of the different channels that riders are using. And that's really the key. And this is how Swiftly works. So Swiftly creates GTFS real-time service alerts in a standard format. Spare provides a set of public APIs that we're able to use to surface on-demand service inside of our app. And with the proliferation of on-demand service lately, there's a new standard called GOFS being created. So in my mind, data standards are really something that we should focus on right now in order to bring riders back.
Thank you, Sophie. And, Swiftly and Transit app have been partners for a really long time. And we also saw this as a need that needed to be addressed. And one of our biggest accomplishments as a company of 2020 was being able to pass crowding information directly to you. And I think our relationship and a lot of the similar values that we have and that cloud companies have is having this open communication so that data can be shared where it's needed to best benefit the transit agencies and transit customers. So I wanted to thank you personally and to thank Transit App and recognize the work that you've done to make that possible. And so the next challenge that I really want to talk about is how can agencies remain agile in such a challenging time? And for a long, long time, consistency was a necessity for successful transit. However, as Sophie mentioned, there's a lot that's out of our control, whether it's shelter in place orders or travel restrictions. And so the best that we can do is help agencies respond to those daily changes. And I think, Luke, I would love to have you jump in here because I think that Spare has done a really remarkable job in empowering agencies to remain agile within so many restrictions and so many changes. So would you mind talking a little bit about how Spare has responded to this challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Nita. I would say agility has really been at the forefront of what Spare has been doing since day one, but it's certainly been made more apparent lately. With the change in ridership, it's made more and more sense for agencies to try out on-demand services, especially in more rural or suburban regions where fixed route is just not super frequent. And so our goal would be to easily transition agencies to an on-demand network very quickly. And when ridership does increase, we encourage agencies to implement fixed route again. But what we're also finding is that many agencies are now landing somewhere in between, where the on-demand network complements the fixed route. And so we really do not want these, on-demand networks to be siloed within a service area where people are taking trips, from their origin all the way to their destination just on a microtransit vehicle. Ideally, it's actually a multimodal trip where on-demand can feed the fixed route to drive ridership even higher. And so, the great thing about on-demand is you can also test it out. Make changes day to day if needed. If you start with 3 vehicles, in a zone, and then you need 2, fantastic. Or you can start with a small zone and expand the service to new areas very quickly. And these multimodal trips that I've kind of been talking about between fixed route and on-demand are really important for agencies moving forward. And that's why the recent partnership announcement between Spare and Swiftly is so exciting, because it's going to take it's going to be crucial for agencies to have great on-demand data as well as great fixed route data moving forward in any sort of network that is built for the future.
Thank you, Luke. And I personally am so excited to hear a little bit more about your work with DRT, and I'm really happy that you mentioned multimodal. I really cling to the silver linings that we can find and the successes that transit agencies are having at this really difficult time. And so I think that you're right. And as we look to the future, we have to think about how do we support agencies to really build a meaningful multimodal network, not just to operate, but also that transit customers and transit users can access in the same holistic way. So I'm excited to talk a little bit more on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of address sort of like resource allocation as well. And like what we found lately is so many agencies have extra capacity within their, their specialized transit system. And so they're actually using those vehicles to power their general public microtransit as well. The agency doesn't need to think about, purchasing additional assets. They can quickly use what is already available to them. And, to kind of stress this even further, if a specialized transit vehicle is serving the general public as well as the specialized service, this does not mean that the quality for the specialized customer will decrease. Because of, our advanced cloud computing software, we can set up different parameters so that a specialized customer will receive the same door-to-door service they expect, but the general public, they may have to walk to a virtual stop. They may be dropped off at a fixed route bus to connect and make their full journey. So that's like, really kind of thinking about the future and how to use your existing assets to the best of their abilities. And kind of one step beyond this too, agencies are really looking to leverage vehicles outside of their immediate networks as well. This could be with a third-party operator, like a taxi, a TNC, and the agency has full control over this now. And it gives them the flexibility to decide, who is going to operate these trips and, in what circumstances they're going to be. And it's led to a lot of cost savings. And I'm going to touch on this a little bit more later when I talk more about the Durham Region Transit Project.
Phenomenal. And I know cost savings and budgets are top of mind, and it's something that I think really also unifies us as cloud-based technology companies. And that goes really to this third challenge, which is how do agencies access KPIs in real time? And I think in the past, what we noticed was we really took for granted metrics like ridership that we, at least I as a transit planner, always viewed as a historic metric and not really something that I needed to look at in real time. And we've noticed this across the board on several different KPIs, like on-time performance, and of course, real-time passenger information. But on-time performance in particular, I think has now taken on a public health metric as well as a necessity to help preserve good public health. And this is an area that we were exploring before the pandemic, but really was accelerated by this challenge and need. And so we as a company have been really grappling with how do we get real-time, highly accurate information into the hands of the people that will need it the most. For instance, how do we get it to our customers, like real-time crowding? How do we get on-time performance into the hands of our operators so that they can manage their schedule as efficiently as possible? So I'm excited to really dig into some of these challenges in the upcoming slides as we start to look at different case studies. So I'm going to have Luke start us off by talking about your work with Durham Region Transit.
Yeah, excellent. We were incredibly excited about the launch in Durham. Durham Region Transit, like many other agencies across North America, has obviously seen their ridership drop. But instead of doing the same old and simply reducing the service hours, Durham took a very innovative approach and sought out to leverage technology to make big changes. And with those lower ridership demand, fixed route no longer made sense across every area of Durham. And so Durham really embraced on-demand transit or microtransit to replace many of these fixed routes to provide a better service at a reduced cost. And so in addition, they did not just want to have one huge microtransit zone, nor did they want to have many siloed microtransit zones. What they did was they wanted to have a microtransit zone that also was interacting with their fixed route system. And so as you can see in this map here, all the green zones are their, the on-demand zones, and then you have a number of the fixed routes cutting through them. And so, therefore, if an on-demand trip starts in one of those zones, you're probably going to be redirected to hop on a fixed route, and then that fixed route is going to take you either to your destination, or if you end up in another on-demand zone, you may also be taking another on-demand trip to your final destination there. And so it's these last mile or last kilometer trips that are really cool too. So if you just want to go to the next slide. As I mentioned before, Spare is much more focused on on-demand, paratransit, microtransit, that sort of thing. So for this project, we partnered with TransitApp for the fixed route integration planning, meaning that a user can plan an entire multimodal journey, seeing which fixed route and on-demand options are available to them. And this is crucial change in how things have been done with most on-demand projects. There's only really a few cities in North America that operate like this, but we're seeing more and more embrace this kind of thinking. And it's been really successful. Over 2/3 of trips are multimodal, meaning that if a user is taking an on-demand microtransit trip, the majority of times they are then hopping onto a fixed route to complete the journey. And that's really what we want to see. And Durham has also been embracing innovative operating model, like I kind of spoke about before. So not only do they use their own vehicles and drivers for this, they also automatically dispatch trips to local taxis within the area. And the way it works is that their own vehicles are going to be prioritized for the trips first. But if their own vehicles are at capacity or are maybe quite far from where the rider needs to be picked up, then we will automatically dispatch to one of the local taxi companies. And beyond the added flexibility of this, there's been up to about a 60% operational cost saving by doing this. So just huge implications there. And just to kind of wrap this up, I'll say Durham Region Network has really been made successful because of all our companies too. Swiftly optimizes the fixed route network, Spare optimizes the on-demand network, and Transit is able to connect the two networks in a simplified manner for the end user. So it's truly a network of the future. And yeah, huge congrats to Christopher Norris and the team there at Durham Region Transit for really taking a risk and seeing it pay off.
Thanks, Luke. And I just want to mention a few things that really stood out to me was what seems so important to how do we bring riders back to transit? We have to reduce the friction that users might face when trying to use a multimodal network. And I think the partnership between the three of us in this project by, swiftly supporting on fixed route side and Spare handling the on-demand transit, and then being able to put all of that into the same place for end users is a huge success story. But then also hearing about the operational cost savings and the fact that there was a multimodal network usage in this implementation, I see it as really promising for the future of transit. So thank you for sharing that success story. And I'm just so overwhelmed. I take it personally when I see transit have victories like this, especially in such a challenging time.
Absolutely.
So next, I would like to share a little bit about the work that Swiftly has been doing with some of our partners. And one of my favorite stories takes place in Miami, Florida, with Miami-Dade Transit. And this is a really interesting story because Miami-Dade, at the height of the pandemic, made a commitment to its riders not to cut service. In order to maintain pre-existing service levels, but also respond to the new capacity guidelines to respect social distancing mandates, they had to very quickly increase their fleet size, which I know that all of you are probably thinking that is a very large task. And it was a large task because the fleet that they had access to, the additional buses that they had access to, did not have previously existing CAD-AVL hardware and software equipped. And so Miami-Dade had to quickly incorporate these vehicles into their fleet. And I would imagine that most of you on this call have had some experience with a CAD-AVL implementation, but these are neither fast-moving projects or inexpensive projects. So we were able to work with Miami to get their new fleet, their expanded fleet, up and running in just a matter of days. And we did this by using available commodity tablets that are connected to the internet with Swiftly's software. And our software is able to take in assignment information. So when these vehicles are then being incorporated into a prediction algorithm, so that information is getting passed along to customers. But also, as importantly, this information allows operations to have insight into these new vehicles and allows them to manage their fixed route fleet dynamically in a way that legacy software and hardware solutions really did not allow Miami to do. And so this project, which would have taken several years and millions of dollars, really just took a few days and a fraction of the cost, which was hugely important for the essential workers that needed to travel around the city at this critical time. The next case study that I wanted to talk to you about takes place in Asheville, North Carolina. And I don't know if anyone has been there, but it is a charming small city in the mountains of North Carolina. And while Miami was really focused on having real-time information really quickly, Asheville needed support from historical data. And this was manifested by traffic levels changing dramatically almost overnight when shelter-in-place mandates went into effect. And I don't know if you remember March, where cities around the world, people were staying at home. And the traffic levels that guided schedules for decades was decimated. And so Asheville needed a way to quickly and accurately update their schedules to match the reality of what their operators were facing on the roads. And so they were able to use our runtimes data to reschedule the routes in 80% of the time that it would have taken them. And we saw this across a lot of our customers. And scheduling is typically a time-consuming process, and it's part art and part science. And so agencies typically, on a normal year, engage in this process maybe 3 times or 4 times a year. And what we're seeing with our customers is that they were updating or creating new schedules 3 times a month. And so this was really critical for Asheville for making sure that their schedules were accurate and that the service that they were providing still maintained that high level of reliability that their customers are used to and is really critical during a pandemic. So now I want to pass the baton to Sophie to talk a little bit about what Transit App has been doing in the last several months.
Thanks, Anita. So I never do a webinar without having a fun GIF, so it was necessary. But I just wanted to bring you all back to the good old days. So, you know, when crowding data wasn't even important. And then, of course, when the pandemic happened, it became crucial overnight. So we sprang into action. So you can go to the next slide. So in April, we launched real-time crowding information for agencies who were able to share that data. So in cities where this is available, so including Saskatoon, London Transit, some places in the US as well, a lot in Quebec, all you have to do is tap on a route and you can find the crowding information directly on the bus. And this is also available in the trip planner. So for example, if someone plans a trip and we detect that they're all very crowded, we might suggest that they select the less crowded trip option, which could help surface less crowded trips to the user. But what if you don't have real-time APC capability? So what if only your fleet is partially equipped? So fleet-wide crowding data is great, but we recognize that it's not a possibility for most transit agencies right now, which is why we found some creative solutions in order to help with that. So we have 3 types of total crowding data in the app. So if you go back to the previous slide, actually, Anita. I think you're a couple steps ahead of me. If you go back to the quiz. Yeah, perfect. Great. So as mentioned, we found some creative solutions for agencies that don't have real-time APC capability or who don't have their entire fleet equipped. So we have, I created a little quiz here in the style of a teen magazine so you can find out which crowding data is your match. So it's as simple as this. Do you have APCs? No, then your type of data is crowdsourced. If you do have APCs, do they transmit information in real time? If they do, you are real-time data. If they don't, then you are predictive data. So I'll walk you through what these 3 data types are. If you could go to the next slide, Anita. Thank you. So if you got real-time data as the result of the quiz, it means that you can transmit this information to platforms like ours so that people looking up this information can find out if a vehicle is crowded. And this is done through GTFS real-time or through an API. So if that's something you can share, then it can be integrated. The second type of data is predictive. So, or we call it sometimes historical. So this is for agencies that have APCs, either fleet-wide or just on some of their fleet, but who can't transmit the information in real time. So what we do is we take about 2 to 4 weeks worth of recurring APC data that we ingest and put through an algorithm to generate predictions. This type of data is also very useful if you're planning a trip into the future. So if you're planning a trip tomorrow, real-time information is actually irrelevant to you. So this is when predictive data comes in. And the last source of data that we have is crowdsourced. So this is especially useful for agencies who don't have APC data at all, or if part of their fleet is not equipped. So crowdsourced crowding data is generated by users that are using the app while riding public transit. So we detect that they're riding the bus and we'll ask them how crowded is the vehicle. And they will answer, and that will be recorded for 10 minutes and shared with other riders. So like most teen magazine quizzes, you shouldn't think that you just need to fit into one category. The best is actually to have all 3 of these types of data. we understand it's not possible for everybody, but as I mentioned, for example, predictive data really comes in handy if you're planning a trip into the future. Real-time data is great, but you can have outages. So it's important to be resilient, have as many types of data as possible. One is better than nothing, but essentially we created these other two types of data so that if you're an agency without APCs, you don't think this is possible for you, we can see if we can help you out with this data. So I'll go through two case studies quickly. If you can go to the next slide, Anita. So I'll share a case study of crowding predictions. So this is a project we did with our partner LA Metro, which is the agency in Los Angeles. So when the pandemic happened, Metro wanted to share crowding data with their users. So something really requested, but they were faced with two challenges. So the first was that only 70% of their fleet was equipped with APCs, but also they were about a year away from being able to share that information in real time. So we took a look at a couple weeks worth of their APC data. We crunched the numbers, put that through our machine learning algorithm, which means that we're constantly evaluating the data, and we consider things like holidays and high traffic days into our count, and it continuously learns from itself. And we generated the predictions, which Metro validated through camera footage and on-site checks. And they found that the predictions were 88% accurate. So really quite high, quite useful. And they've been really happy so far with the process. And I wanted to speak to agencies like Metro who have 70% of their fleet equipped with APCs. What happens with that other 30%? So either there's other types of data like crowdsource that can come help fill that gap. But if your fleet is a rotating fleet, sometimes you can actually cover your entire fleet with APC data. So it just means that we have, some trips may not have the crowding data, but as you can see, the accuracy is quite astounding. So on to the next study to touch on crowdsourcing data. So these are 3 cases of agencies that are encouraging their riders to use crowdsourcing. So I'll touch on Saskatoon for now, because Saskatoon actually has real-time crowding data, and but not their whole fleet is equipped. So they encourage riders to use crowdsourcing where this information is unavailable so that they can reach a fleet-wide set of this information. And the same for Metro. So they've got historical data, but they want to, keep adding to that data. So as I mentioned, a mix of all of this data is really the key, but if you've got, just one, it's better than none. Thanks, Anita.
Thank you, Sophie. I am just so impressed by the work that you've done. And I know it makes me think of equity. I think the year of 2020 had a lot of us thinking about equity. And what I love about this is APC systems, also like CAD-AVL systems, are expensive, take a long time to install, are very hardware dependent. And so the fact that Transit App was able to find a way to really incorporate solutions, regardless of what part of this tech infrastructure path an agency is on, is really, really amazing. And I think it really does speak to the power of cloud-based technology. And when I think about what's important for the future and what really drives us as companies, I think about the traits of cloud-based technology. And a lot of what came through in the solutions that we all presented today is that we're very different from legacy hardware and software solutions. We're able to really implement at a lower cost. We're able to provide seamless over-the-air updates, very simple data access, and we want to work in a world where we're not blocked by proprietary nonsense, in not so elegant terms. And so that's really, I think, what guided me to think about what should the future look like. And the last 9 months, they've taught us anything, is that it's not enough to provide solutions to support agencies in the time of an emergency. We really need to look forward and build tools that empower and enable a brighter future for transit. And I think the predictive feature of your crowding tool really speaks to the uncertainty of a lot of what we've grown comfortable in. You know, we can't really count on the 9 to 5 commute anymore. We can't really count on central business districts being the main trip destination for customers. And so how do we build tools that really address this uncertainty and really helps bring riders back to transit and to a transit system that meets their changing needs? And so I see the future as an opportunity for each transit agency to really reevaluate what it means to provide transit to their community. And as we come up against 2021, I think that we need to build tools that empower transit providers to utilize every resource at their disposal, whether it's on-demand vehicles or transit or taxi cabs or fixed route or bike share. And we need to help agencies and cities and innovators reimagine the system. And we need to provide a platform that enables folks to really think holistically of our multimodal transit networks. So how are we going to do that? And that's what I'm really excited to talk to you about. And we're here today because we have this vision of turning transit tech on its head. Our vision is to build an ecosystem of technology that makes public transit open and connected to all of the multimodal forms of transportation that people use today or that they could use tomorrow. I don't know if anyone has been to San Francisco, but there are people on like scooters and hoverboards or motorized unicycles. So who knows what's going to happen next? But we need to make sure that we can address all transportation modes. And today, I think the transit technology era that we've been living in for a long time is really marked by super smart hardware and dumb software. If you think about it, almost every bus has to have a supercomputer on it in order to operate. We want to reverse that. We want to have smart software and dumb hardware. We want to make sure that the changes required of technologies to support the changing needs of transit agencies and their customers happen as quickly as we can produce them and send them over the internet. Internet's a wild thing. And so we have this vision of cloud-based technology really supporting transit with, you know, those classic traits of seamless over-the-air updates, simple data access, no more proprietary nonsense, no vendor lock-in, and specialization across many companies whose products talk to one another. And we know that cloud-based tech makes this all possible. But in order to realize that vision, we need to partner with like-minded companies that believe in open APIs, that believe in interoperability, and that believe in the power of the cloud. And by working together, we'll be able to help authorities answer some of the most pressing questions facing the transit community today. And some of those questions that we've really talked about as a community is how do we deliver safe, equitable, reliable, and on-time transit in the face of COVID and in the post-COVID context? How do we dynamically manage service? How do we adjust schedules to respond to crowding restrictions and to new traffic patterns? And how do we deliver the most cost-effective service across an entire transit network? All three of our companies believe deeply in the importance of access of high quality public transportation. You, the attendees of this webinar and beyond, is what really brings us together. And pictured here is really what we see as the first step to realizing our vision for the future of transit technology. And what we have here is a way in which we think allows agencies to tackle operational challenges while still providing an essential service for all. With Transit App combining fixed route and on-demand transit services in one application, riders can plan complete trips and evaluate their different options, which might include an on-demand ride to a high-frequency bus route or direct to their final destination. But what we know is that a win for any part of our multimodal transit network is a win for all. So you, our great and greater community, is really what brings us together and is really what's pushing us into 2021. So now I want to take a moment and I want to dedicate the rest of the time that we have together today to hearing from you. We would love to answer some of your questions, and we really want to hear what's top of mind as you and your transit agencies and operations teams head into 2021. So thank you for your attention. I'm going down to my list of questions to see what I have so far. Okay. It looks like our first question from the audience is for Spare. So Luke, if you wouldn't mind, could you tell us a little bit more about what the implementation process was like at Durham?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we had our kickoff sort of in the summer, and we were pretty quick to launch in the grand scheme of things by September last year. And I guess a really great thing about this implementation was that Transit actually already had a partnership with Durham Region Transit. So many of the users, already had access to Transit App, so they were able to receive, updated information prior to launch. And so, yeah, that was a really important piece. And I would say even then, when you make a change this big to a network, being able to really market it and rely on, marketing material to publish that to community makes a huge difference in the, the success of the launch. And to add to that, I spoke previously about agility. And, of course, when we launched, there was lots of little things that I guess we needed to change to make it, more successful. And, I'm sure this is how, all of our networks are going to continue. We need to be able to iterate and to improve them. On demand is not just sort of one implementation. I would say it's a continuous process that, is going to evolve to serve the needs of the community over time, over the months and years that it's in place. And I think it's also important to really prove once it is launched and once it is implemented that it is a better service. And so I guess a few of the things we found, we actually have a 90% approval rating for the multimodal trips. And I saw that as a question coming in. So that was really successful, that people have kind of taken to this and understand it. And actually, on average, trips taken by On Demand would have taken 290% longer if they only had access to a fixed route alone. So these people who are living in these areas are getting a much better quality of service with an average wait time of only like 6 to 8 minutes. So I think you have to, when you are making changes, you can't just make the change and kind of expect everybody to accept it. It really does have to improve the network. And that's exactly what Durham has done.
Thanks, Luke. That was great. I know personally, I wanted to know a little bit more. But I see our next question here is for Sophie. And the question is also part of statement. I thought the LA Metro case study was very interesting. We know how important real-time arrival and crowding information is. Do you have a plan for how to really validate your hypothesis that crowding information can help bring riders back? Or, you mentioned some surveys you've done. Is there any information around that you could share?
Yeah, so I would say that it's sometimes difficult to measure specifically if a certain type of data, let's say crowding, will bring riders back because there are so many uncertainties and things going on with the pandemic. So, naturally, as the pandemic goes away, hopefully soon, riders will come back. So it is something difficult to measure. But as I mentioned previously, I think it's, data in itself is great. Usage data is great, but we can't forget about the human element. So really reaching out to the customers. And that's why we've been doing so many surveys. We can collect data to try and understand something, but we can also just ask them the question. And that's why, for example, we developed integrating crowding data, because users mentioned that that's something that would bring them back.
Thank you, Sophie. I know I've been thinking about that too, as I am a transit user, and every piece of information I had about when a bus would be crowded and when it would be empty is sort of out the window. So I know that the research and the partnerships that you're putting into place is really, really important. And personally, as a transit user, thank you. Okay, I have one more question in here, and it is for Swiftly. It's for me. It's kind of weird reading a question to myself, but the question is, there has been reference to the importance of on-time performance in regaining ridership. I would maintain that on routes with better than 15-minute frequencies, service reliability in the form of consistent vehicle spacing is more important. How can we best manage this consistency while also ensuring balanced vehicle occupancy? Woo! I love this question. Headway reliability is such an important metric. And the importance of high frequency service, especially when paired with on-demand in less dense areas, is critical. So, if we want to build a really meaningful transit network, we need to make sure that our high frequency routes that are fed by on-demand services are super reliable. And one of the ways Swiftly has been thinking about this is we do have a headway setting in our onboard app. So with onboard app, we wanted to give the information of service performance to operators directly, because in reality, operators are first line of defense and the people that have the most impact on schedule adherence. And so we did develop a setting where if you do have a more headway-based route, you can look at your route performance through headway metrics rather than on-time performance. And we know that this is important for scheduling as well. So we have taken all of that information that we display in real time and have put it into a Headway Insights tools that enable, it turns data into really useful information to help find efficiencies on the back end. So I hope that answered your question, whoever was kind enough to send it my way. And I could talk headways all day long, but you're right. And this is a very important thing that we also worked with our partner agencies to make sure that it is a useful feature to help manage service. Okay. I'm being told that we have one more question. Or no, these are our last questions. And I just want to let you know, while this is our last question, Morgan is going to make sure that we follow up individually with questions that we weren't able to answer. So please don't worry. But the last question I wanted to close out with was, we've been talking a lot about equity. And for a lot of us, equity has been on the forefront of our mind as we transition from 2020 to 2021. And so Sophia and Luke, I was hoping that each of you could talk to us about how your companies are thinking about equity as you look forward to product development and partnerships in this new year. How can we maintain equitable access to transit while also introducing new technological tools that may require a smartphone and a data plan, which could potentially exclude some customers? So Sophie and Luke, if you wouldn't mind helping us close out on that note.
Sure. So I can go first as a, obviously mobile-based company. So I'm not going to pretend that, I can't speak to the percent of folks that don't have a smartphone, and that is an incredibly important category. But we are a smartphone solution, so I will speak to what we're doing in terms of equity on that front. But I think it's important to say that there's still a kind of vague idea that apps and smartphones are for Instagram influencers and professionals with disposable income. But the reality is, with recent research, at least in the United States, is that we're approaching ubiquity. So according to recent research, there was 81% of Americans own smartphones, which is quite higher than even 5 years ago, and that includes something like around 70% of lower income individuals have a smartphone as well. So the biggest drop is actually that we've found through research is actually of people over 65, and even half of people over 65 on a smartphone. So all to say that our app is actually used mostly by people who are riding the bus, where people can rely on real-time information more than that of trains or subways. And the demographics for bus riders, as we know, tend to be lower income than those for rail. So thinking or keeping that in mind, I would say that that's the user base we're focused on, and we're focused on developing features that improve the transit rider experience for those riders. So that's why we developed crowdsourcing, so that riders who are just riding public transit can help improve data for others. So that's the equitable element that we are focusing on right now. We've got some other really exciting projects coming up. I won't spill the beans, but we're trying to make sure that the core features of the app and our partnerships are designed to improve and connect with that everyday rider to improve the experience.
Thank you, Sophie. And we look forward to seeing what Transit App has to offer throughout 2021. Luke, would you mind sharing how Spare is thinking about equity this year?
Yeah, absolutely. I can touch on a few things. So I would say, in our case, equity really starts when transit agencies, properly plan ahead when launching on-demand services. They really need to know how launching a new service is going to impact, different groups' lives. Essentially, will on-demand make key services more or less accessible, and to whom? And we've put a lot of attention and thought into this. And really the only way we've found to best address this is to have a tool that allows you to rapidly prototype different options for service configurations and analyze the impact that has on different marginalized groups. So, this could be different ethnicities, seniors, people with disabilities, women, et cetera. And I guess just to kind of add some additional insight into the kind of equity discussion, on-demand does not follow the typical men commuting to urban centers flow. It is much more democratized approach to movement. This is likely one of the reasons we have a much higher female ridership than male on most of our services. And this has actually been more of a recent discovery of ours from some survey results. So next week we're actually hosting a focus group to discuss how we positively impact those riders who identify as women. This may lead to product changes, marketing changes, potentially even service configuration suggestions to bring more equity within these services. And then on the kind of the mobile smartphone front, a portion of what we do, of course, is microtransit or on demand, but a lot of what we do is paratransit and specialized transit. And of course, there are very few people who are using smartphones in order to access this service. So pretty much every single service we have, there's always another option outside of a smartphone for people to be able to access this, including in Durham region. So they are able to call in order to take these trips. We can't just leave people behind in that sense. We have to make sure we're fully inclusive there.
Thank you, Luke. I hope that we get to see a blog post after you have that focus study I'm sure that we all have stories of what it's like riding transit, myself as a woman. And I love hearing about that aspect of Spare and making sure that everyone can book an on-demand service or a paratransit ride. And that's something that Swiftly in general is very laser focused on. And we think about equity in every implementation to our product that we make. As we look of design for back-end usage, but then also we're really focused on making sure that our real-time passenger information, the part of our product that customers really interact with, is available not just to Transit app, to Google Maps, but we want to make sure that that information is available through SMS and voice. We want to make sure that alerts and real-time information is going to all phones and to all endpoints, regardless of where our customers are. And I know we are right out of time. So I just want to wrap up really quickly and say thank you for your questions, for your times, for all of the hard work that you do to keep the people around the globe moving. And we want to continue this conversation. So please reach out to us, follow up on questions, tell us what you're thinking about. We'd love to hear from you. And I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday.